Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. So welcome, everyone. I'm excited to have Kathleen Walls back on Big Blend Radio here on our International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association podcast. We call it the Food, Wine, Travel Show. We also have a digital podcast magazine you can check out in the link in the episode notes that goes with this show. It's called Travel, Food, and Wine. And I know that Katie is all about that. Katie is not only a travel writer, she's also an author. And today, she's joining us to talk about Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I love this because this really goes with America celebrating its 250th birthday this year. And we think about George Washington, right?
Right. It's a whole different viewpoint of Washington in Fredericksburg.
Well, you brought in the woman's viewpoint in your article, and that is linked in the episode notes, everyone. So check that out. But I love that you talked about his mom, and they really didn't have an easy upbringing.
No, they didn't. And she was such a big influence on him. I mean, some of what she did when her husband died, when he was very young, if she had remarried in those days, the plantation, which wasn't very prosperous, would have gone to her new husband, and Washington would not have inherited it. And she didn't marry, and she tried to run it on her own, which was unusual for a woman. She was a very strong woman, obviously.
And, so Fredericksburg, where is it in Virginia when people are traveling, like if they come in from New York or from, it's such an interesting thing. Did you road trip there or fly in?
Road trip. I drive whenever I can. Flying is
You're a road tripper like me. I love it.
I love to road trip. And, I'm trying to place what would be the nearest airport, and I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would say, D.C. and all that stuff, but.
Yeah, it's close to D.C., so probably D.C. would be your closest airport. I did pass right by D.C.
I've done that drive. I've done that drive when
the traffic is terrible by D.C. on 95.
It's just, heads up, it sucks. Mm-hmm. But the destinations you get to are worth it.
It is definitely worth it. And it's such an unusual look. I mean, you always think of George Washington, the military hero, and George Washington, the president. And this gives you George Washington, the young man, the boy, and his family. And even his sister, who you never even think about, but she comes into this, says her home is beautiful to visit.
All of these are like museums that you can go to.
Right. Their home, like our house museum. The best way to start, which we started on our trip, was the trolley tour. And the trolley tour, the driver is very knowledgeable, and she drives you through the old section of it. And she talks about not only Washington part of the history, but the whole history of the city and how one of the things that was really interesting is the little tiny houses, very, very narrow. And the reason for that was that people were taxed on the width of their lot. So these people had little 12-foot houses.
Wow.
And long, going back and long and upstairs, but narrow because of the taxes. It's funny how money influences everything.
It is.
Yeah. And the whole 40 block area downtown is on the National Historic Register. It's, just for that part alone is worth seeing.
It's interesting to me. Yeah. So Fredericksburg, what would you think of people going there as a destination? What's lodging like? Is it a huge city or?
It's a very comfortable sized city. It doesn't have the heavy traffic that you find in places like New York and Chicago and Atlanta. Downtown is very walkable. In fact, we took a walking ghost tour, which was fun. Of course, you need to drive or get around, but there's Uber. And I believe that there's a bus service. I wasn't using it, so wasn't really paying too much attention to that. But there is so much there that's worth seeing. Not only the Washington, it goes into the Civil War part of the heritage there too. And I focused on Washington on this. One of the kind of offbeat things which kind of ties to Washington was Hugh Mercer's Apothecary shop. Today we get sick, we go to a doctor, we expect all sorts of technical stuff. There, and they when you go in the shop, it's like you're walking back in time into the 1700s. And Hugh Mercer fought with Washington. He was a refugee, I believe, from Germany. And he came over here and became friends with Washington, and he fought under Washington in the Revolution later on. But at the Apothecary, when you go in there, I mean, he even pulled teeth. He did all, and they actually have leeches in there.
I know. I've had it's the African Queen again. Didn't we talk about this?
Yes, yes, we did. I was there in Key West not too long ago. Yeah, and all
The
of the
African,
keys, and Key Largo.
yeah, the leeches.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but the leeches, you know, yeah, no, I saw that photo of a woman
Holding the leech.
holding a leech,
Yeah.
and the photo is like she's obviously moving because none of us want to hold it that long. And because we were in Connecticut a few years ago, and I played in a pond with leeches with dogs, and I
Oh.
know I told you about that, and I thought I was really brave, and I'm from Africa, I can do this. And then I'm like, heck no, and that's not actually the language I use. And once those little slithery things get on you, it's like, no. But
Oh, no.
leeches were a huge part
Right,
of
it
medical
was
history, and it started,
every
I think, in India. I think it was part of the
right.
Vedics did it. Also, a way to draw blood and clean your blood so your new
Mhm.
blood would come in.
Yeah.
And no,
I'm glad we don't do them today. And she even mentioned about how they pull teeth, and of course she's talking as if she's in the time frame. And she said, of course, sometimes they pull part of your jawbone out with it, and
no,
everybody was sort of clenching up. Nope, not coming near me. But it's such a really step back into life, as it was normal for them to take that for granted.
exactly. That's so fascinating because it's like we look at what we're going through. I mean, dentistry has changed every
Yeah.
few years, right? And it's so funny. It was just thinking we just had a podcast go out on a certain destination historic, and they're finding new things and new things, and somebody commented, and this person had just been there, and new things are there, so they're like, oh, this is a great guide, but new things have happened, so this is out of date. And I'm like, if you actually listen to the podcast, you'll know we talked about that. Things change. You can go there, and 2 days later they have a new finding when
Mhm.
we talk about historic destinations. And even our history changes as we discover more. And when we look at medical stuff, our history is changing every day.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
time we go to the doctor, they have something new, right? Definitely
Laser
drugs.
surgery, and laser surgery is old stuff now.
Yeah, I mean now, like what can be done with eyes versus what was done back in the day
Mhm.
is it's night and day. And so it's really interesting. And I also think what's interesting, you go into the apothecary, is that Washington is actually pretty famous for his teeth and having
Yeah.
wooden teeth.
That's
Also,
such a myth about the teeth being wooden anyway. They really weren't.
really?
No, they were made of probably animal teeth and possibly some human teeth, but they really weren't wooden teeth. It's just a myth.
So
Just
they
like the
made it
cherry tree.
really
He
now.
didn't chop the cherry tree down. You probably would have been very glad to have a cherry tree. Ferry Farm, when you visit Ferry Farm, it's really like stepping back into his childhood, because this is where he lived from when he was 6 years old until he was 22.
See, that's so cool. I've been
Yeah.
to part of Lincoln's place when Lincoln's birth area, and it's
Yeah.
so cool to go to what was their formative years like, you know?
Growing up, it was very hard. His father died. He was very young. He was, ooh, what was he? Oh, I don't remember exactly what age he was when his father died, but he was still very young, young child. And his mother was the influence in raising him. The tobacco, they grew tobacco, which was the crop there. But tobacco is a very hard crop. You plant it, and then once it grows, then you have to move and let that lot sit fallow for years, because it takes so much of the nutrition from the land. So it really wasn't a prosperous plantation, which you would think it was. There were enslaved people there. He had 20 enslaved people at the time of his father's death on it.
Wow.
Growing up there, he had to really work hard. He was the oldest of the five children when they moved there, and his mother was pregnant with the little girl who died shortly later. They
So his
were
mom went through a lot.
She did, and she was obviously a very strong woman. And this was a little bit out of town. It's sort of across the river from the downtown part of Stark part of Fredericksburg. The problem being is that her husband, Augustus, had two children by his first marriage. And so, based on the laws of that time, those children, Lawrence and Austin, were going to inherit most of his property when he died. So in order for her to make sure that George inherited the little plantation Ferry Farm that they had, if she had remarried, as I said, it would have gone to the new husband and he would have been in charge of it. So she never married. She stayed with, and she encouraged him to become friends with his stepbrother, Lawrence in particular, the oldest, who at that time was the one who lived in what later became his home. George grew up,
This
he
is
had to work
this.
very
I'm
hard.
just going to stop here for a second because I think we always just think like George Washington arrived on a boat, you know?
Yeah.
I ca-
Yeah, that
does
classic
this
picture
make
of him crossing the river in the Delaware in
yeah,
the
and we just think
valley.
he arrived and
Yeah. And
set up camp. I
his
didn't even
military,
realize he was born here. I did not know that.
he was, yeah. He wasn't, growing up rich and wealthy. He worked very hard and he was learning. And one of the reasons he became a surveyor was because at that time a surveyor would get out and see new lands. And by being friends with his older brother, who was in much, better financial state than he was, one of the relatives of his brother Lawrence, Lord Fairfax, didn't inherit, was given by the king, 3 million acres. So he needed it surveyed. So George Washington, by that time, he's learning to survey. And when you visit Ferry Farms, there's even tools and stuff that he used, borrowed tools because he didn't own
Okay.
them, books and things where he studied to learn how to be a surveyor. And by being a surveyor, he got out there and saw all these new places. So by the time he's 20 years old, he's bought about 2,300 acres. That's
Wow,
how he
that's
began
amazing.
acquiring it because he was out there and this was land nobody even knew existed,
But 20
right, 20
big.
years old. I mean, and he began at
Yeah.
16 with the surveying. Uh,
Wow.
and they're still finding more and more evidence of different things. The archaeology lab there, you can see, look into the lab, it's behind glass, and you can see in there and see the artifacts and things they're finding. The home is not original because obviously it didn't last that long, but they rebuilt it right on the foundation of the original Ferry Farm home, and they built it to plans as such as close as possible to what it really would have looked like at the time.
Hmm.
So you really feel like you're stepping in there.
That's
But
nice.
being friends with his brother and all of that, that helped him, gave him a step up into society.
Okay. And
And
that's what his mom knew he had to do.
that's what his mom was trying to help him to do. And as she got older, and her health wasn't too good, he ended up wanting her to move into town next to his sister. Married very well. She married a man named Fielding Lewis, who was a merchant and well-to-do. Their home is done, even their paint, I think they said it was the equivalent of like $22 a gallon or something for the paint there. It was a
Wow.
Prussian green. It was a status symbol, even the paint, plaster work and everything at their home, which is called Kenmore, historic Kenmore. And the home that is original home of his sister Betty
Wow.
Lewis. Betty was sort of, probably his closest sister. When he decides to try and help his mother move into town, and she really didn't want to get off of Ferry Farm, he didn't have any real strong feelings about Ferry Farm because he had worked so hard. It wasn't a pleasant memory for him. And he was willing to sell it, but his mother didn't want to leave. And finally, he talked her into it. And as her health wasn't too well, bought her a home in town, which you can tour.
Mhm.
That's really good to it. Kevin was my guide there, very, very detailed. I mean, you could tell that man's passionate about that home. You can see her bed. There's a few artifacts that actually belong to her in the home. You just get the feeling that she wouldn't have. She really didn't want to move there, but it was kind of her health, and she was close to Kenmore, the sister's house, Betty's home.
Mm,
And so you really get the feeling of the family structure
mm.
there.
So there seems because it was a big family still.
Right.
'Cause, I mean, that's what the women, you know,
There were
they
strong
would
women, obviously.
the strong women. I mean, they had multiple births.
Yeah. I mean, you can imagine having 8 and 10 children.
I mean, and not in like now and
Yeah, and
here,
not all the modern
pop a
medicine
pain
things.
pill, you know,
Yeah.
and
And have them at home with,
and
maybe a
it's still.
servant.
Let me just
Yeah,
reiterate that before everyone emails me. It's not easy no matter what, but 8 to 10 times is insane. Like that's your poor body goes through so much, and then when you lose a child is also still traumatic. And
Right.
she went through that.
Went through that too, yes. That was common in the day. I mean, very few of the whole family lived to grow up. It was even into my great-grandfather's time. My great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, had 13 children, but only
Whoa.
2 lived to grow up and marry and have children of their own. My
Wow.
great-grandmother and the other her sister who ended up marrying into the Proudhon family. They had a son, one son that lived to adulthood, and he was a fireman, but he died in a fire in New Orleans. So having, child after child after child, and of course she died before he did, obviously, after having 13 children. But
That's
life was
hard.
not easy for a woman in those days.
No, no, no. And isn't that amazing going to Virginia and how, like, that's the oldest, that whole region is like the oldest history,
Virginia has so much of our history. It has more presidents than any other state, too, on it. Because
Oh, I
and
didn't know.
getting the other thing that I focused on in that when I was in Virginia was Richmond. We're getting off subject, but that was on the Patrick Henry because he gets so overlooked. He's
Yes,
overshadowed by people like George Washington. But
yes.
yet, kind of when he gave that "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, that was
Hmm.
kind of the trigger that pushed Virginia into the Revolution because they were debating, do we really want to get involved with Boston and New England and all of this? Of course, too, we think of Washington with the Revolution, but remember, he fought as an Englishman in the French and Indian War prior to that when he was
Right.
in his 20s, which again was help with his brother's military influence. His brother was very much into the military. Oh, his older
Mm.
brother, stepbrother,
That's the one that the
half
mom
brother.
wanted.
Right.
Well, this is
Right.
so interesting because I think that's where we think like he just came over a boat from England and started.
Right. You don't think of all of this pre stuff before he
Right,
becomes the president, the hero.
right.
You
And
see a
then we think of
different
his
George
farm
Washington, a
and
young
we think
man
of,
struggling and working and interestingly, his mother's home, Mary Washington's home, the one that he ends up buying on that Ferry Farm, her home in town. He visited her there shortly before he was sworn in. She lived to see him elected president of the United States.
that's awesome, isn't
So,
it?
yes, and her
She
bed
must
was
have been happy.
she probably was. And, just a feeling of who she was, you get that feeling, which is something history kind of ignores. So much history ignores a lot of the little facts, and sometimes those are the most interesting.
It's what you get from traveling
Right.
and going to places like this. It's
That's
it
what I love about it.
and I know you're an author and I love historical fiction because it helps you more than anything.
And you have to be very accurate because if you make one mistake, somebody's going to find it.
And then yes, but it's like when you actually go to a place, you get it
Yes.
just from
Yes.
the aesthetics and the atmosphere, the
It
vibe,
gives
the feel,
you a complete
smells,
feeling,
you know.
different feeling about Washington than you have the stiff man with the white head wig and crossing the Delaware and leading the army. You see a young man trying to get ahead, trying to make his way in the world and
Wow.
succeeding very well. But you stop and think about it. At that point, he was an Englishman. He was not an American. He was,
That's the
yeah.
point because I think that's where in
And they lived
history.
under English law, which was why
Mhm.
the plantation would have gone to her husband
Ah,
had she married.
that's
Told
right.
her,
Hey, so
yeah,
this is such a wow. It is at that time where everything was a little different.
right.
Yeah. So that's why we think of Washington like that he just came over from England and here to save the day. And
Mhm.
that's not how it
Right.
worked at
Yeah.
all. But that I'm just thinking it's just that immediate, I didn't grow up here, so I didn't have the same
Yeah.
education in school over it, but I did like Washington was this and that. We didn't
Yeah.
know all the
But you
and
you get a different feeling, as you say, when you go there traveling. Even fiction, good fiction will stick to the facts, the
yes.
real facts, and work the fictional characters
So
in with
that you
that.
get a feel.
Yeah.
It's like the best way. Whether you if you want to understand history, I say read a historical novel, go to a
Right.
play, watch a movie, sure, but the novel's going to be right there. Really good movies do a good job too. But
Right.
going there, if you can get to the place of where stuff went down, you get it. The instant you walk into a historical building, just the sounds, the smells, everything takes
Especially
you to what happened.
the actual real building. Even Ferry Farm is as close as you can get to being real, but it's obviously a wooden building wouldn't have survived that many years. His sister's home and Mary Washington's home are original. And you just feel like I'm standing on the same floor where these people stood. George Washington really slept here.
Yeah, you're right. You're in his place.
And it was kind of one of the docents made a joke about that. We were in the sister's home, Fielding Lewis' home, and we're up in the attic up there, and it's, literally George Washington probably really slept here. And it's not fancy or anything, but when he was visiting his sister, that's where he would have been.
Isn't that wild? Now, if you ever see him in a movie, being portrayed in a movie, I should say, that's going to be something that you think of. No, actually, this is how it was.
Yeah, you got to think of the background behind it.
Yeah. So for visitors like going there, let's talk a little bit about that. What is lodging like? What can they expect to do? So you want to do a ghost tour? You want to go on the trolley tour? I love these kind of tours.
The trolley tour is really
awesome.
a good way to start off because you kind of get an overview of everything. Just a little tiny touch. Museum, the Fredericksburg Museum also has the whole history. Not again, the ghost tour and the trolley tour. All of this does more than just the George Washington history, because also there's a big Civil War history there.
Yeah, that's important to dive into as well. So I know, and everyone, just again, we've got an article from Katie in the link notes, or the episode notes linked in there. And you can also go to fxbg.com, which is the tourism entity for Fredericksburg, Virginia. And you can click on that and help plan your trip. But yeah, there's a trolley tour, the walking ghost tour, a Ferry Farm that she was talking about, which was really, Ferry Farm was tobacco.
Right. Virginia's big crop was tobacco. Interestingly, Virginia was kind of the one that really began the slavery thing in the United States. Not in Fredericksburg, but in Virginia, Virginia itself. Earlier than that, even when they were using indentured servants to grow the tobacco, it was very hard work. And what happened? England said, of the Irish and English and the people in jail, if you go over there to the United States, to Virginia, work so many years and you'll be free and you can, become rich and have your own plantation and all of this. But the people, the owners, the rich owners of the plantations realized these white people, Irish and English, weren't doing too well under that hot blazing sun all day working in the farms, but the black indentured servants. So they came up with this really obnoxious law that said if you weren't baptized a Christian before you came into the United States, before you came into Virginia, then you would be indentured forever. But if you were baptized before, well, that was okay. So that was how they drew that different line. And it was strictly greed. I mean, it was because the black people could work better under the sun. Just pure greed.
Wow.
History has some really nasty stuff sometimes.
And
better to know it and to learn it and to understand it.
Not do it.
And not do it again.
I know. We talk about that.
Let's not relive it again.
I know. We always say, can we just stop here? And apparently not. So, I mean, truly, there's stuff going on that, history repeats itself.
History repeats itself. And if you look at it, you can see it. I mean, anybody who knows anything about history, you can see this is exactly the way it was done
then,
and they're doing it all over.
Yeah, there's ways to. I mean, and I'm talking on a global perspective and not getting political or anything like that, but globally, you can see where things do, repeat.
Right.
And, that's why travel is so important. Going to these places, understanding, getting a vibe for it. And you'll always find a story that just like what you're telling me. I mean, I never even thought about his mom and
sister. You never even hear about his sister.
There's going to be stories that you think the history until you go to a place. And then you're going to hear something that you go, I had this in my mind. I'd already made my mind up about this and this and that. Until you travel, that's going to make you change your mind unless you're stubborn about it.
But I mean, if you're interested in facts And you know,
Yeah,
this
there
is
you go.
one of the interesting things with his sister and brother-in-law. Fielding really believed in the revolution, and he believed, that it was right, and he was very well to do before the revolution, and he invested tons of his money in trying to help Washington in the revolution, believing he was going to get repaid afterwards. But he was never repaid. He died very poor.
Well, it happened.
It happens. But you tend to think of Washington and his whole family of being wealthy aristocracy.
And they weren't.
They weren't, no.
So, okay, so when you go to Fredericksburg, definitely you want to go on the trolley tour, and then the
Right.
walking ghost tour.
The walking ghost tour is very interesting. It stays in the historic district, and it's not focused just on Revolution. It goes into the Civil War era and more modern day, and there's a civil rights trail, because there was a lot of factors that began in Fredericksburg with the civil rights too. So it's more than just Washington, but that was what I was kind of focusing on here.
Ferry Farm.
And Ferry Farms and
Ferry Farm, and that's Ferry.
Right.
Yeah.
And historic Kenmore.
Okay.
The historic Kenmore is the original home, and it's the only part of their plantation that was left. And you can see the wealth that was there. The plaster work is fantastic.
Isn't that where his sister lived?
That was his sister's home, right? And because her husband was very wealthy, not because of her money. And his mother's home is more modest. It's a frame home in town, but the really magnificent one is the historic Kenmore.
There's also the monument to Mary Washington.
Mary Washington, they're not positive of where she was buried, but they believe that's where she wanted to be buried, at Meditation Rock. And Grover Cleveland was president in 1894. And that's when they erected the monument to Mary Washington. And the interesting thing was, they sent out letters to women named Mary asking for contributions to help support the monument, and it was paid for by women named Mary mostly. The government didn't pay any of it. It's the first one in America built to honor a woman, and it was paid for by women.
The very first
monument in honor of a woman in America.
Wow.
So, and it's a tall obelisk type monument.
Right. And this was done through President Grover
Cleveland. When Grover Cleveland was president, right.
Wow. And you talked about Hugh Mercer's Apothecary shop. Right. You can all say it the way you want. And then the area
there's a connection with Washington there, because they were friends. And the reason he moved to Fredericksburg was because Washington suggested it.
Oh, okay.
He was living in Pennsylvania first. He was a refugee from Scotland, not Germany. He settled in Pennsylvania, and then when he met Washington, Washington invited him to come to Fredericksburg, and he came there and opened his apothecary there.
Wow. So everyone, check that out. The article link is in the episode notes. And you also talk about the area museum that really just gives the whole...
One other interesting fact about Mercer, too, he died in 1777 in the Revolution in the Battle of Princeton, and he was a great-great-grandfather of General Patton.
Whoa!
So history continues on.
That's why I always say history has no borders.
Nope, it keeps going.
Today in our podcast land at Big Blend Radio, I've done so many stories today, and I just keep going back to history has no borders. Love has no borders. History has no borders, but they both cause war. They do. That's amazing. But wow, what amazing history when we think about America's 200th birthday.
Right. And it's something to really think about at this time, too. It's very important that we think about how we started and what we started. Of course, the thing that's very hard to forget is when they're writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they're saying all men are created equal, and the people writing this were slaveholders. So, you've got to stop and think about all of the facts.
I think they also, I don't want to go into the whole system now. That will be a whole, I'm going to stop myself
right there. That could make a whole
story
right there.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. I mean, because the way, you've got to think we are such a huge population with so many technical advances. I mean, we even went to the moon before I mean, do you think our founding fathers thought of going to the moon? Maybe, but,
I think I'd ever heard of them. I remember my mom telling me back when I was in high school before Sputnik, And I was big on science fiction books, Isaac Asimov and all of those. You really can't ever go to the moon. That's not going to happen. It would take too many million years, too many light years away from them. It can't. And then Sputnik.
Well, I know. Isn't it pretty
I wanted to be
amazing?
a nuclear physicist until I found out that you got to be good at math to get into physics.
Oh,
And
well,
math
yeah.
is not my subject.
Well, you've definitely found your path travel writing. And speaking of
Oh, yeah.
that, being part of the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association, which is, our show here, we do this every second Tuesday,
Mhm.
every second Friday, every third Monday. We have a show with the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association, who we call IFWTWA. It's an easier way to say
Quicker way to say it.
that long name there. But,
It's
you
a
know,
fantastic.
you went to their conference this past year in 2025.
Right. I've been to most of the conferences, not all of them, but I
Mhm.
went to the 225 in Louisiana. I loved it.
You had
Of
to
course,
because you're
Louisiana's
from New
my home
Orleans.
state. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
this was out in the Cajun country mostly. I did press tours, and it was just kind of sort of like home in a way. I always, whenever I go back to Louisiana. And next year's going to be in Milwaukee. And I'm not a big beer person. My favorite alcoholic drink is rum and bourbon.
Oh, well, you got to hang out with Nancy. I did not know that about you,
Coconut
Katie.
rum and pineapple juice. That's my go-to. But
Oh,
I like bourbon and good moonshine.
she's got a list, everybody.
Yeah. Talking about apothecary, if you have a sinus thing, and I guess I'm giving medical to talk to your doctor. But anyway, when my sinuses, if they get congested and I can't breathe, a little bit of if you can get moonshine or the strongest bourbon you can get, a mint leaf, honey, some lemon, stick it in the microwave for a minute, breathe it, sip it and breathe it, and it worked better than any medicine you buy in a drugstore.
So we got to take moonshine. I love this, Katie. This is fantastic.
Oh,
So
yeah.
did you learn that being on the?
No, I learned that a long time ago. I sort of learned that from my Irish grandmother.
I was gonna say this sounds like
And
a
then when I lived
grandma.
up in North Georgia too, with the Appalachian culture, there's so much folklore up there.
Well, you're talking about Blairsville.
Right. And people there in the early days, I mean, they didn't have a doctor anywhere around. They brought the cures over from Ireland and Scotland, and they worked.
You do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone
Well,
coming back and discovering that this really is working.
How long have you been a member of IFTWA?
About 10 or 11 years off and on. I got out for about 1 year and then I got back in. It's a
Yeah.
great group. I love that we do the press trips. I like the conventions. One of the things I really like, especially if you're on a tight budget, with a lot of the organizations for the conventions, you have to stay at the hotel. It's part of the cost. But with IFWA, your convention is separate from your hotel cost. So if you choose to get an Airbnb with some friends and share, you can do that too. They'd like you to stay at the hotel, but depending on your budget, you could
Do what
still
you
get
need
to
to
the
do.
convention and do an Airbnb and stuff and still see it.
Very cool. Well, it is always fun chatting with you, Katie.
It's always fun with you too, Lisa.
This was you taught me a whole bunch of American history.
Well,
I
you
did
love
not
history,
know.
obviously, and you're interested in it.
I am.
That's why it's always fun talking to you.
Then, I was kind of embarrassed. I'm like, I should have known this history. That's how I felt about it. But I'm like, dude, I know that
we all learn different things.
we learn so much, and then you forget it until you talk to someone or go back but when you travel somewhere, you don't forget it as much because it gets ingrained in those stories. And I love, the docents. I want to do a big shout out to docents that most of them are volunteering and sometimes do the dress up on top of it. And
they
dedicated.
Get into that character.
Yeah, and they just really dedicate their time to get storytelling to get you to understand what it was like.
It
And
gives you the feeling. You really feel like you're there.
It's huge. It's huge. And for kids, I think that gets them going, it's just all so cool. But everyone, again, the link is in the episode notes so you can read Katie's article. You can go to her website as well, americanroads.net. Also go to fxbg.com to learn more about Fredericksburg, Virginia. And the link for IFTWA, ifTWA.org, it's IFWTWA.org is in the link, as well as the new digital podcast magazine out that we have for IFWA. And Katie's article will be in there in a couple weeks, so stay tuned for that. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Lisa. Always enjoyed doing it.
It's fun, and happy travels.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFWTWA, which is IFWTWA.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone!